Welcome to Newsline and you're watching On Point. Today we have 3 on points. In the first on point, we look at the China versus Dalai Lama debate as he says that the institution will continue after his passing away. China on the other hand says that they will decide on the succession. In on point 2, we look at the politics over heart attack deaths in Karnataka's Hassan district. In the third on point, we look at why Iran has chosen not to cooperate with IAEA. And now let's take a quick look at the headlines. Shocking experience aboard SpiceJet flight, window frame dislodges mid-air. Death toll rises to 10 in cloudburst catastrophe in Mandi district. Rains continue to wreak havoc in the state. Quad grouping issues statement condemning Pahalgam terror attack, vows to bring perpetrators and financiers to justice. Siddaramaiah asserts he will be Karnataka Chief Minister for full 5-year term. Poaching fears grip Rajasthan's Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. 3 tigers killed by interstate gangs suspected to be from the place. Akali Dal leader Vikram Majithia remanded to 4-day custody in disproportionate assets case. Bangladesh ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina sentenced to 6 months in prison by International Crimes Tribunal. Blast in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa kills 5 government officials. Hamas says it's open to ceasefire but wants a complete end to war in Gaza. Ahead of his 90th birthday on July 6th, the Dalai Lama has said that the centuries-old Tibetan Buddhist institution will continue after his death. The end year of speculation. This ends years of speculation that started when he indicated that he might be the last person to hold the role.
If it is about Lama's reincarnation, when all the followers have unanimously said that the reincarnation should continue, then it is obvious that it will come since my September 24th, 2011 statement, which states that responsibility for doing so will rest exclusively with members of the Gaden Phodrang Trust, the office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They should consult the various heads of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions and the reliable oath-bound Dharma protectors, who are linked inseparably to the lineage of the Dalai Lamas. They should accordingly carry out the procedures of search and recognition in accordance with past tradition. I hereby reiterate that the Gaden Phodrang Trust has sole authority to recognize the future reincarnation. No one else has any such authority to interfere in this matter.
Dalai Lama reiterated that the process to find his successor must follow traditional Tibetan Buddhist practices and must be decided by the Gaden Phodrang Trust. Hours after he reloved Beijing's authority in picking the 15th Dalai Lama, China said his successor must be approved by the Chinese government. The reincarnation of Dalai Lama, the Pancham Lama and other great Buddhist figures must be chosen by drawing lots from golden urn and approved by the central government, Foreign Ministry spokesperson said.
The Chinese government implements a policy of freedom of religious belief and has issued regulations on religious affairs and the management of the reincarnation of living Buddhas in Tibetan Buddhism, protecting this way of succession in accordance with the law. The reincarnation of the Dalai Lama must adhere to the principle of domestic search, golden urn draw, and approval by the central government, and be handled in accordance with religious rituals, historical customs, and national laws and regulations.
Established by the 14th Dalai Lama, the Gaiden Phordrang Trust is a non-profit organization tasked with promoting Tibetan Buddhism, preserving Tibetan culture, and supporting the welfare of exiled Tibetan communities. Tibetan Buddhists hold that the Dalai Lama has the power to choose the body into which he is reincarnated, a process that has taken place 14 times since the institution began in 1587.
If we see a good prospect of resolution of the Sino-Tibet conflict, then it's possible that we will try harder. But right now, if you look at all the policies and programs that the Chinese government had laid down in Tibet, it's all aimed at destroying the identity of the Tibetan people in the belief that if there are no nationalities, then there are no nationality issues. So this is what Xi Jinping's government is doing, targeting Tibetan language, Tibetan religion, which are the basis of Tibetan identity. Tibetan language is one among the 15 oldest languages in this world. We have always said that we are proud of being a repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom, rooted in the values of ahimsa and karuna, nonviolence and compassion. So there won't be any shift in the position.
In his book, Voice for Voiceless, published, the Dalai Lama stated that his successor would be born outside China, but Beijing insists that it holds authority over the succession of the Dalai Lama. On this issue, I am joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri, former Indian diplomat, Professor Swaran Singh, Center for International Politics, JNU, and Tenzin Lekshe, spokesperson for Central Tibetan Administration. My question to you, Ambassador Sikri, is how contentious this succession plan would be, because on 6th, Dalai Lama celebrates his birthday, and I'm sure he's also again going to make an important announcement there.
Well, I think the question of the Dalai Lama's continuation is certainly a sensitive issue with the government of China. But I think as far as India is concerned, we have always said that the Dalai Lama is free to follow his religious activities. And we've drawn a distinction between the temporal and the spiritual activities of the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama himself has given up all temporal power, and he is focusing only on his spiritual and religious role. So this is fully in keeping with what the government of India has always supported the Dalai Lama on. And he's not been bringing himself into any political situation at all. Now, on this count of his own spiritual role, the role of the next Dalai Lama, the 15th Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama himself has been thinking about it, discussing it for decades now. And earlier on, he had even said, that I'm going to have to think about it. Should there be a Dalai Lama, the next 15th Dalai Lama or not? And we know that this is in their tradition, in the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. It is the role of the current Dalai Lama to think and consider whether he is going to reincarnate if he feels that there is some unfinished work that needs to be done. And he had spoken about a process of consultation, and he had said that he would announce everything by his 90th birthday, which, as you know, the lunar calendar birthday was on Monday, and the official birthday is on Friday, and it's on the 6th of July. And I think that he's made it very clear that he has received detailed letters, views from all the Tibetan leaders around the world, including within mainland China, including in the Central Tibetan Administration, the government in exile, including from Buddhist leaders across every Asian country. He's mentioned the Russian Federation, he's mentioned Asia, countries of Asia, including India and other countries. And all of them have pleaded with him for the continuation of the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
And he's now declared his view that yes, the Dalai Lama will continue, and he will decide. It will only be decided, as you said yourself, by the Gaiden Phordrang Trust, which is the non-profit organization. So he has stated his views very clearly, that this will be a person outside China, outside mainland China, born in a free country. And at one time he even said it could be a lady, it could be a woman. So all these things. Then I think one has to respect his statement as relating to his religious and spiritual role as the head of Tibetan Buddhism. And I think in that sense, one has to look at his role and not at all in any political context.
Okay, Mr. Lekshe, thank you for joining me. Do you think that this entire process in future is going to be as simple as it sounds, without any complication?
See, we see storms coming, right? Because of China's interference in the unique Tibetan Buddhist traditions. China do not have any legitimate authority on this incarnation process, simply by the fact that they are the destroyer of the faiths. Over the last 70 years of Chinese occupation of Tibet, right, they have destroyed more than 6,000 monasteries, right? Tibetan monks and nuns who are the holder of the faiths were being killed, incarcerated, tortured, right? And even now, right, the Tibetan monks and nuns, if they're being caught possessing the photo of His Holiness Dalai Lama, they're being jailed and imprisoned and tortured. So therefore, see, we know that by the fact that through the traditions, through the old traditions which we have, His Holiness has the legitimate authority. He is the sole authority on the incarnation of His Holiness. But China persists that they have their own authority, but somehow they do not have any legitimate right on the incarnation of His Holiness Dalai Lama. By the fact that they don't have any traditions because they don't believe in religion, by the fact that they don't have any historical record which significantly proved or stated that they have the authority. They don't have. We had the 14th Dalai Lama till date, right? And throughout the 14, right, look at the present Dalai. Did China have the control and authority on the incarnation of 14? Nowhere. It was not being used through the golden urn. China emphasized that all has to go through the golden urn. The 14 was not being chosen through the golden urn, not even have any influence of the Chinese authority. Look at the 13, even, his predecessor. Right. So they were all being recognized through the unique Buddhist traditions. Right. Even now, His Holiness in today's statement stated that it has to go through the Buddhist traditions, and nobody has any role to play.
Okay. Now, Professor Singh, let's break it down. Let's break it down for our viewers. A lot of people will not have that span of history. One, what is the issue at stake here? That's one. And secondly, what makes Chinese more very, very sensitive about it? Let's decode it for our viewers.
Okay, thank you, Karthikeya. Last December, Chinese Communist Party celebrated crossing 100 million party cadre. Now imagine that people in China who claim and identify themselves as Buddhists have crossed 350 million, more than 3 times the number of the Chinese Communist Party, and they have very strong allegiance to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Worldwide, of course, there are 7.7 Tibetans, of which 6.5 million are in China. And of that, I said 350 million are about, focusing on Dalai Lama as their symbol. So here, Chinese are worried that, depending on what Dalai Lama says and does, can impact their domestic politics very clearly. Now read that with the historical experience of Tsarist Russia, British India, and of course, Chinese Empire trying to control Tibetan plateau. And from 1911 onwards, Britishers kind of working to carve out a special identity for Tibet, to declare that this is an independent entity and therefore Chinese have only suzerainty on it. And initially, Americans wanted Tibet to be with Chinese, but after Korean War, they also used Tibet as an instrument against China. So Chinese have suspicions with external powers. They have also concerns about their own population, siding with the Dalai Lama much more than siding with the Chinese Communist Party. And in that sense, now the possibility of Dalai Lama saying that reincarnation will happen in a free world, indicating not in China, and whether, the new process will allow the trust to go into China in doing that search and recognition
Professors,
is not possible.
Professor, when you say free world, what is that geographical aspect of the free world? Can you just explain that for our viewers? Does it mean the Indian side? Does it mean Cambodia? Where is this free world?
It would broadly mean in terms of where Tibetan population is, for example, not Buddhist population, but much more, I think Tibetan Buddhism is what we are talking of. India has about 100,000 Tibetan people in India. United States and Europe have another number of about 25,000 plus and minus. So when we talk of free world, it could be in India, but also it could be some other country other than India, which will create its own challenges. Now, if the potential reincarnation is happening outside India, where will he be located? Will he come back to McLeodganj in India? How will India react to that situation? How will China react to that situation? So I think those are all speculations as of now. But let me also underline to your viewers that, His Holiness once had mentioned that he is going to live up to 113 years. Now, if that happens to be the future for reincarnation as a subject matter, then of course we have nothing to worry in the immediate. But the fact that he is finally confirmed that he is going to have reincarnation, that the Chinese will not be, legitimate the authority to identify and recognize that he is creating a trust and that trust is going to do it, is an indication that China has to really worry even right now about how indications are as to how the Dalai Lama wants to deal with this issue. In 1980s, Chinese tried to reconcile with Dalai Lama, but that didn't lead us anywhere. So in that sense, I think it's a serious concern for China in terms of domestic stability, turmoil, and so on. It's concern for China how the major powers are going to play on this issue and connect it to human rights and so on. And I think India will have to play very, very careful in terms of how do we deal with it. In case there is a situation of 14th Dalai Lama being no more there, where will you build his memorial? Is it in India? This is the first time in history a Dalai Lama has a burial place outside Potala Palace. So even if India tries to say, we don't recognize central administration of Tibetans in India, we want to keep away from these things, India will be entangled in such situation in case such incarnation process begins. So I think it is good that we start thinking on these issues, and therefore I think appreciate the Chinese concerns and make Chinese understand India's limitations being a democratic country, and that is the kind of approach India has towards all religious sects, that will allow them to determine their own affairs on their own. And in that sense, I think it's also an issue that India and China will have to tackle over a period of time. The sooner they begin to talk about it is better. They will be able to manage it perhaps better with minimum cost to their relationship. They are just coming out of that Galwan incident of 2020, and now there's no new issue is cropping up in that sense. So there are serious concerns in China. There are serious issues, challenges for India-China relations.
But I think that's the basic issue. If you look at post-colonial India-China relationship, Tibet is at the heart of it, sir.
Indeed, Tibet is at heart of it. But if you look at how India, in fact, Chinese have often, if you look at post-independence history, often used India to approach and cultivate Tibetan leadership in India. Repeatedly this has happened. And of course, when China became much more powerful, it started directly talking to India in a very different fashion. And not just India, but many other countries have over a period of time kind of sidelined this issue of Tibet when they want to deal with China. And that is also a reality which has seen that even Dalai Lama trying to seek an approachment with Chinese, sometimes saying that he is not going to have reincarnation, sometimes saying he might be born as a woman. But I think today's statement is very clear. He's confirming that reincarnation will happen. He's also clearly legitimizing his own trust to be the one to start that process.
Actually, that's an important word you have used. Ambassador Sikri, it all boils down to legitimacy. I think that's the word. Who will legitimize it? Will it be New Delhi? Will it be Beijing? Or will it be the autonomous process of the religious functionaries?
Well, I must say first and foremost that even the statement by the spokesperson of the Chinese government spoke about religious freedom in China. On paper, at least, they are promising and they are talking about religious freedom in China. So I think if we take them at their word and they're going to say that there is religious freedom in China, then certainly the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, has the full authority and right to decide on his religious successor. Again, I am taking this entirely in the context of the spiritual role of the Dalai Lama as the head of Tibetan Buddhism and his authority based on previous experience as just explained to us by the representative of the Central Tibetan administration, that he has the full authority. This is what was done in previous instances as well. So, the Chinese government putting in questions like the golden urn method of selection and so on, I think, lottery and so on, that kind of thing, it doesn't hold any relevance so much. If there is religious freedom, the Dalai Lama has the full authority. The Chinese state has themselves spoken about religious freedom. India has always given the Dalai Lama full religious freedom, full authority in the spiritual world, in the spiritual field as head of Tibetan Buddhism, and that freedom continues for the Dalai Lama. So for us, what he has said, his statement is fully in keeping with his own position as the 14th Dalai Lama. He's deciding on the Dalai Lama. Fine, he will go ahead with it. And the person would be from outside China. We know that. So I don't see there's a problem. And certainly McLeod-Ganj has emerged as the center of the Tibetan movement in exile. And that person would come there. So I think we should take it very calmly. Yes, the Chinese government may try to make a huge furor about it, but for us, it is very much in keeping with the position of authority as head of Tibetan Buddhism that we have accorded to the Dalai Lama all these years. And he himself has given up his temporal power. So we are only talking to the leader.
But it's still going to be a tightrope walk. Professor Singh, I'm going to come to you. I'll come to you, Professor Singh.
I want to add one more point here, that while many countries, as Professor Saran Singh said, have tried to ignore the Tibet issue, we also know that there is a very big movement worldwide on the preservation of Tibetan religion and culture. There's a huge interest. There's a huge support for it. And, at all levels, in all governments, there's been a huge amount of discussion of this worldwide. So I do not think that any effort by the Chinese government to wipe out Tibetan religion and culture is going to be accepted anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. Mr. Lekshe, what are we to expect on the 6th, which is on this weekend? How is the day going to look like for Dalai Lama?
So all the Tibetans, right, inside and outside of Tibet, wishes His Holiness to stay long, healthy, right, and for the sake of not just for the Tibetan people, but for the entire humanity, because so long His Holiness has been the voice of peace, wisdom, compassion, right, tolerance. So this is not just for the Tibetans. So therefore, this 90th celebration is not just about a one day. We have earmarked the whole year, right, to celebrate as the year of compassion, right? Because His Holiness for the Tibetan is a manifestation of a lot of our Lokitaswara. There's a lot of compassion, and His Holiness has dedicated, and we are cherishing the moments of His Holiness' life, legacy, and contribution of His Holiness to this world. So therefore, the whole year will be celebrated as the year of compassion, as a recognition, and in honor of His Holiness, right, legacies.
Okay,
so
Professor.
It's a moment of joy. And today, as Ambassador Sikri has also mentioned, because today is the moment of joy for us, because we have not just Tibetan, but even the Chinese people from China has repeatedly requested His Holiness, right, that the institution should remain. So today, His Holiness has graciously affirmed that the institution Dalai Lama will continue. But this is a moment of joy for all of us.
That's a very important statement. I think it has been very widely received, widely published in all the foreign newspapers. In fact, it was on the front page of all the web editions. Professor Singh, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. What makes this such an issue around the world is fundamentally the contestation between Tibetans trying to celebrate and preserve for posterity their Tibetan Buddhism traditions versus China's increasing political ambitions and security concerns. And that has seen, of course, increasing monitoring and sinicization of all minorities in China, all religions in China. To begin with, Chinese communists were different than Europeans. They were not atheists the way Europeans were. They wanted to allow personal religious freedoms, and certain extent of that has continued. And as Chinese became prosperous, they have become much more visible in terms of celebrating their personal religious preferences over a period of time. But increasingly, there have also been very strong regulations, and particularly during Xi Jinping's time, monitoring and regulation is the buzzword for all religious sects, particularly the Tibetans in China. So in that sense, yes, there is a freedom. But if you look at historic examples of 1995, what happened to Panchen Lama, later what happened to Karmapa Lama, I think it's very likely that Chinese are preparing to also prop likewise their own Dalai Lama in case the process of reincarnation has to begin with.
Are you
And
saying
that
there can
would
be two
again-
Dalai Lamas?
There have not been two Panchen Lamas, two Karmapa Lamas, but let's see if there is going to be two Dalai Lamas, and that would make
Okay.
the contestation even more complex, because if the future two Dalai Lamas are hosted, one in India and one in China, this is going to really, I think, create major challenges for our bilateral relations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've really run short of time. Thank you all of you. Thank you, Ambassador Sikri. Thank you, Professor Swaran Singh. And thank you, Mr. Tenzin Lekshe, for joining me, because this is not going to be an easy walk for either of the country. So this was on point one. In the second on point, we'll look at the mysterious heart attack deaths in Hassan and Karnataka, but after a short break.
तेरे लिए मंगाओ मेरे नए म्यूजिक गॉगल्स मंगा